A moving story of redemption, love, passions, and new beginnings. She hides her injured arm for fear of being touched. He, a reclusive billionaire, is paralyzed when he discovers the origin of that scar. Watch this story until the end. You will be surprised by this story. If you like love stories, romance, subscribe to this channel. Leave your comment every day. We post videos like this. Continuing. Nina and Kale, Part 1. Coffee spilled onto the Carrara marble table as Nina's hand shook. It wasn't an accident. It was the way Kale approached from behind, silent as ever, and the way the heat of his body brushed against her back as he reached for the sugar bowl. A touch that lasted less than 3 seconds, but that made every fiber of her skin react as if it had been touched by fire. Nina jerked away, knocking over the cup, and the shards of porcelain scattered across the kitchen floor like small mirrors reflecting the golden morning of Angra dos Reis. "I'm sorry," she muttered, bending down to pick up the pieces. Her hands were shaking more now, and Nina cursed inwardly. 3 weeks of working on the mansion, 3 weeks of pretending to be invisible, and all it took was one accidental brush for her to lose the control she had worked so hard to build. Kyle didn't move. She could feel his gaze boring into the back of her neck, heavy and unreadable, always watching, always analyzing, as if trying to decipher a code she had created to protect herself. "Leave it," he said, his voice hoarse and low. "I'll call someone to clean it up." "No need." Nina continued picking up the shards, cutting her index finger on one of the sharpest pieces. A drop of blood stained the pale marble, and she muttered a word her grandmother would have disapproved. That's when Kale knelt down beside her. The movement was so unexpected that Nina stopped breathing. He was too close, close enough for her to smell his subtle, expensive, masculine scent, close enough to see the fine lines around his dark eyes, close enough to realize that he wasn't looking at the cut on her finger, but at the way she flinched whenever anyone came near. "You're bleeding," he said, holding out his hand. Nina instinctively stepped back, hiding her injured hand against her chest. The gesture was automatic, involuntary, like a wounded animal protecting its wound. And it was at that moment that something changed in Kale's gaze, as if a penny had dropped, as if a piece of a puzzle had finally found its place. I'm fine," Nina stammered, standing up too quickly and almost losing her balance. Kale stood up slowly, never taking his eyes off her. He was 42 years old and had the posture of someone who had ruled empires, but at that moment he looked as if he were trying not to scare a wounded bird. "Nina," he said, and her name in his voice sounded different, not like the impersonal address he used with the other employees. There was something softer there, something that made her heart race in a dangerous way. "I need to finish serving breakfast," she said, her voice firmer than she felt. "You always have breakfast at 8. And it's already done." "It's just me here," Kale interrupted, "and you're hurt." Nina looked at her cut finger, the drop of blood now dry, and almost laughed. If he knew of the other marks hidden beneath her simple uniform, the scars that traced maps of pain on her skin, he would think it ridiculous to worry about such a insignificant little cut. "It's just a scratch," she said, heading to the sink to wash her hands. But Kale didn't move away. He remained there, standing, watching her every move with that intensity that made Nina feel naked, even when she was fully dressed. The Pedra da Gavia mansion was a monster of glass and concrete, suspended over the emerald green waters of Angra Bay. 5 floors connected by spiral staircases and silent elevators, suspended gardens that seemed to float in the air, an infinity pool that blended into the horizon. It was the kind of place that appeared in architecture magazines and impossible dreams, the kind of place where Nina should never be. But he was, and he had a reason. Kyle Navarro Davila, the name she had scribbled 1,000 times in torn notebooks, the face she had memorized through photos in old newspapers, the man who had unknowingly financed the hell that had destroyed her childhood and that of dozens of other girls. Nina turned off the tap and dried her hands with more force than necessary. 3 weeks under cover, 3 weeks pretending to be just another maid desperate for work, 3 weeks trying to find a loophole, a piece of evidence, anything that could connect Kale to what happened at the Hope Foundation. 3 weeks of sleepless nights and nightmares that woke her up in a cold sweat. And in 3 weeks, the only thing he had discovered was that Kale Navarro Davila was not the monster he had imagined. It was worse. It was human. How long have you been cleaning? His question caught her off guard. Nina turned, forcing a neutral expression. A few years. Where? Houses in Copacabana, Botafogo, some apartments in Ipanema. The lies came easily now. She had rehearsed the story so many times that she almost believed it. Kale nodded, but there was something in his eyes that suggested distrust or curiosity. Nina couldn't tell which was worse. And your family? I don't have it. That wasn't a lie. Silence stretched between them, heavy as the humid air of a Rio morning. Through the panoramic window in the kitchen, Nina could see the yachts anchored in the private marina, small white dots floating in crystal-clear waters. A different world. A world where people like her didn't exist, except to serve coffee and pick up broken china. Why here? Kale asked suddenly. Like this? Why did you accept to work here? Angra is far from everything. Most people prefer to stay in the city. Nina felt her heart race. It was a dangerous question, but she was prepared. I need the money, he said, shrugging, and I like the silence. It wasn't a lie. She really needed the money. The few bucks she had saved were barely enough to pay for the rent of the tiny room in Realengo where she lived. And the silence, well, the silence was necessary so she could think, plan, remember without going crazy. Kale studied her for a moment longer, and Nina had the uncomfortable feeling that he could see right through her, as if her lies were transparent. I'll make some new coffee, she said, trying to break the moment. No need, it's my job. The sentence came out sharper than she intended, and Nina immediately regretted it. Kale frowned slightly, and she realized she had crossed an invisible line. Maids didn't talk to billionaires like that. Maids didn't confront them. But Kale didn't say anything. He just nodded and left the kitchen, leaving Nina alone with the broken pieces of the cup and his scent still in the air. Nina waited until she heard his footsteps retreat completely before she allowed her shoulders to relax. Shit, she was losing it. 3 weeks of pretending to be submissive and invisible, and all it took was one accidental brush, and the whole facade would start to crack. She picked up the last pieces and made herself a new cup of coffee, her hands finally steady. She couldn't afford to be careless, not when she was so close. The night before, she had finally gained access to Kale's office. It had been easy. He always went for a run on the beach at 6 in the morning, and the security system was good, but not impenetrable to someone who had learned to hide in the shadows since the age of 12. But what she found there left her, more confused than enlightened. Hundreds of documents, contracts, financial reports, but none related to the Hope Foundation. No mention of the donations that funded the horror she and other girls had experienced. It was as if that part of Kale's life had been completely erased or hidden somewhere else. Nina served coffee on a silver tray along with toast and fresh fruit and went upstairs to the office where Kale usually worked. The mansion was a maze of hallways and staircases, but she had memorized every inch of it. She had to memorize it. Her life depended on it. Kale sat behind his mahogany desk, typing on a silver laptop. He wore a white dress shirt, no tie, the sleeves rolled up to his elbows. Nina tried not to notice his strong arms, the way the muscles moved beneath the thin fabric, the shape of his hands that now stopped typing to look at her. "Leave it. On the table," he said, without looking up from the screen. Nina placed the tray where it had been indicated, trying to be quick, but something on the laptop screen caught her attention. Numbers. Lots of numbers, and a name that made her blood run cold. Gustavo Davila. Nina forced herself to continue arranging the tray, pretending she hadn't seen anything. But her hands were shaking again, and the sugar spoon clinked against the porcelain. "Are you okay?" Kale's voice sounded worried. "Yes, sir." Nina finished packing everything and headed for the door. "Nina." She stopped, without turning. Around, "If you need anything, just ask." Nina closed her eyes for a second. There was something in his voice that made her chest tighten in a way it shouldn't, like he actually cared, like she was more than just a maid. "Thank you," she muttered, and left before he could say anything else. The rest of the morning passed in a haze of mechanical tasks. Nina cleaned, organized, shopped at the local market in Angra, her mind always focused on the name she had seen on the screen. Gustavo Davila. She had researched him, of course. Cale's adopted brother, silent partner in several businesses, a discreet man who rarely appeared in public. And that it was never mentioned in any of the official documents of the Hope Foundation. That afternoon, while washing clothes in the mansion's laundry room, Nina heard voices coming from the office. Cale was talking to someone, probably on the phone, since there were no other cars on the property. Nina walked silently up the stairs, stopping in the hallway near the office. The door was ajar and she could hear fragments of conversation. "I don't want to be a part of this anymore, Gustavo. You know it's not that simple. I've done enough, more than enough. The consequences will be yours, Kyle. Yours and no one else's." Nina stepped closer, her heart pounding in her chest. It was a tense conversation, full of implications that she couldn't fully decipher. "Listen to me," Cale said, his voice harder than Nina had ever heard it. "I stepped away from public life for a reason. I'm not going back, not for you, not for anyone." There was a pause, and when Cale spoke again, his voice was lower, more dangerous. "And if you try to force me, you'll find that I still have a few cards up my sleeve that you don't know about." The call ended with a thud, and Nina heard Cale's footsteps approaching the door. She ran to the laundry room, arriving there with her heart racing and her hands sweating. Minutes later, Cale appeared in the doorway of the laundry room. His face was set, his jaw set, his dark eyes darker than usual. "Nina," he said, and there was something different in his voice, something urgent. "Yes, sir?" "I need you to do something for me." Nina felt butterflies in her stomach. "What is it?" Cale studied her for a long moment, as if he was making a difficult decision. "Tonight at 11 o'clock, I'm leaving the house. I'm leaving the front gate open and the security system off. If anyone comes here, if anyone comes looking for anything." "You didn't see anything. You didn't hear anything. You weren't here." Nina stared at him, confused. "I don't understand." "You don't need to understand. You just need to promise me that you will do what I ask." "Why?" Cale stepped closer to her, and Nina fought the urge to back away. He stopped a few inches away, close enough that she could see the small scars on his face, close enough that she could feel the heat radiating from his skin. "Because I don't want you to get hurt," he said softly. The words hit Nina like a punch to the gut. There was a sincerity there that scared her more than any threat. I don't know what you're talking about." Cale raised his hand slowly, as if to touch her, but it stopped in the air between them. Nina could feel the warmth of his palm close to her face, could see the lines of his hand that almost caressed her. "You're not who you say you are," he said, his voice even lower. "I've known that since day one." Nina's blood ran cold. I don't care," Cale interrupted. "I don't care who you are or why you're here. I just don't want you to get hurt." Nina stared at him, lost. This wasn't part of the plan. Cale shouldn't care about her. He shouldn't look at her like that, like she was precious, like she mattered. "Why?" she whispered. Cale dropped his hand, but didn't pull away. "I don't know," he admitted, "but when you got here it was like the house started breathing again." The words hung in the air between them, carrying a weight Nina didn't know how to carry. She had planned everything meticulously, getting close, gaining trust, finding evidence, destroying. But she hadn't planned for this, for the vulnerability in his eyes, for the vulnerability she felt herself. "I have to go," she said, finally pulling away. "Nina." She stopped at the door, without turning around. "The promise," Cale said. "I need your promise." Nina closed her eyes. "I promise." And she ran off, leaving Cale alone in the laundry room with her scent and the echo of a promise they both knew could change everything. That night, Nina couldn't sleep. She lay on the narrow bed in the maid's room, listening to the sounds of the mansion. At 11 o'clock sharp, she heard Cale's car pulling away down the cobblestone road that led to the estate. 15 minutes later, another car arrived. Nina got up silently and walked over to the window. It was a black BMW with tinted windows. A man got out of the driver's seat, tall, middle-aged, with neatly cropped grey hair. Even in the darkness, Nina could recognize him from the photos she had studied, Gustavo Davila. The man entered the mansion using his own key, confirming that he knew the place well. Nina waited a few minutes before leaving the room and following him silently through the corridors. Gustavo went straight to Cale's office. Nina hid in the hallway, watching through the crack in the door. He opened the safe. Nina hadn't even known there was a safe there, and took out several folders of documents. He spent about half an hour photographing the papers with a cell phone, the quick, efficient hands of someone who had done this before. It was when Nina saw the folder that changed everything. Hope Foundation, Confidential Reports 2018-2020. The air left her lungs as if she had been punched. There it was, the proof she had been looking for. But it was in the hands of the wrong man. Gustavo wasn't just an accomplice. He was blackmailing Cale with the evidence of the crimes themselves. Nina backed away slowly, her heart pounding so hard she was sure Gustavo could hear it. She needed to get out of there. She needed to think. She needed to understand what this meant. But when she turned to go back to her room, she bumped into a small table in the hallway. A crystal vase swayed dangerously, and Nina managed to catch it at the last second. The noise was minimal but sufficient. "Who's there?" Gustavo's voice cut through the silence like a blade. Nina ran. He took the stairs 2 at a time, crossed the main hall, and threw himself into his room, locking the door and leaning his back against it. His heart was beating so hard it hurt. He heard footsteps in the hallway above, searching, then nothing. Gustavo finished what he was doing and left half an hour later. Nina waited until she heard the sound of the car driving away completely before she allowed herself to breathe again. When Cale returned at 2 in the morning, Nina was still awake. She heard his car pulling into the garage, his footsteps coming up the stairs, his bedroom door closing. And then, silence. Nina stared at the ceiling, the tears finally streaming. She had spent 3 years planning her revenge on Kyle Navarro, Davila. 3 years hating a man who, she now discovered, might be just as much a victim as she was. The real monster was Gustavo. And he had Cale exactly where he wanted him. But now there was another problem, a problem much bigger than revenge or justice. Nina was falling in love with the man she came to destroy. Nina and Cale, Part 2. The first storm of the summer arrived. 3 days later, bringing winds that whipped at the mansion's glass windows like impatient fingers tapping on the door. Nina was in the library when the lights began to flicker. First an uncertain flicker, then complete darkness that swallowed the entire house like a hungry mouth. She should have gone back to her room. She should have waited for Cale to figure it out on his own, like he always did. But there was something about the pitch black that reminded her of places she'd rather forget, of nights when the only company she had was shadows and the sound of her own frightened breathing. That's why he looked for the candles. Her fingers trembled as she lit the first match, the brief flame illuminating the tall shelves filled with books that probably cost more than she would earn in years. The second match went out before she could reach the candle wick. So did the third. "Shit," he whispered, and the word echoed in the heavy silence of the library. That's when he felt his presence. Cale stood in the doorway, holding a lantern that cast a golden circle around his feet. Nina hadn't heard his footsteps. He moved silently through the house like an elegant ghost who knew every floorboard, every creaky step. "The generator will take a few minutes to kick in," he said, his low voice echoing in the dark space. "Storms always cause problems with the power grid." Nina nodded, not trusting her own voice. She was sitting on the library floor, surrounded by burnt matches and stubborn candles that refused to light. Cale approached her slowly, as if she were a wild animal that would flee at any sudden movement. The light from the flashlight danced across her face, creating shadows that highlighted the strong line of her jaw, the sensual curve of her lips. "You're shaking," he observed, stopping a few feet away. It's cold. Lie. The air was damp and warm, heavy with the approaching storm. Cale set the lantern down and knelt beside it. He took one of the matches from the box Nina was holding and lit it in one fluid motion, shielding the flame with the palm of his hand as he brought it close to the candle. The light spread softly between them, creating an intimate bubble of golden warmth in the darkness. Nina could see every detail of his face now, the fine lines around his eyes, the small scar on his chin, the intensity of his gaze that seemed capable of reading every secret she held. "Better?" he asked. Nina nodded, but she was lying again. She wasn't better. She was worse. Because now she could see the genuine concern in his eyes, could feel the heat radiating from his body, could feel the way he was careful not to scare her. And that was dangerous. More dangerous than any darkness. "Why are you in the library?" Cale asked, lighting more candles until the room was bathed in flickering golden light. "I was organizing," Nina said, gesturing vaguely toward the bookshelves. "At 11. O'clock at night." She stared at him, trying to find a convincing lie, but there was something about the way he looked at her that made it hard to lie, like he already knew she was hiding something but didn't care. "I can't sleep when it's storming," she finally admitted. It was only half true. Nina really couldn't sleep when it rained, but not for the reasons Cale might have guessed. Why? The question came so naturally that Nina almost answered before she realized what she was doing. She almost told him about the nights at the foundation, when the rain on the tin roof sounded like gunshots and the other sounds, muffled screams, heavy footsteps, slamming doors, mingled with the roar of the storm until it was impossible to tell what was real and what was a nightmare. "I just can't," she said, hugging her knees. Cale studied her silently for a long moment. There was something in his gaze that made Nina feel simultaneously exposed and protected, as if he could see right through her, but wouldn't use what he saw to hurt her. "When I was a child," he said suddenly, "my mother died in a stormy night." Nina looked up in surprise. Cale never talked about his family or his past. He was a man who lived in the present, as if he had been born an adult with no history. "Car accident in Baradatihuca," he continued, his voice neutral but with an underlying weight that revealed old pain. "The car skidded in the rain and hit a pole. I was 9 years old." "I'm sorry," Nina murmured, and was surprised to realize that she really was. "For years, I would lie awake every time it rained, waiting for something terrible to happen again, as if the storm were an omen." "And now?" Cale gave a sad smile. "Now I only stay awake because I've gotten used to it. Some habits never completely disappear." A bolt of lightning illuminated the library windows, followed a few seconds later by a clap of thunder that made the glass shake. Nina flinched involuntarily, and Cale noticed. "Do you want to tell me what your storm is?" he asked softly. Nina closed her eyes. For one crazy moment, she wanted to tell him everything. She wanted to tell him about the Hope Foundation, about the marks on her skin, about the night she woke up screaming. She wanted to tell him that her real name was not Nina Villar, that she was here to destroy him, that she had spent 3 years planning her revenge. She wanted to say that she was falling in love with him and that it was destroying all her plans. "I can't," he whispered. "Why not?" "Because if I tell you, you'll hate me." The words were out before she could stop them, filled with a brutal honesty that made the air between them grow even thicker. Cale stared at her, and Nina saw something change in his expression. "Nina," he said, and there was an urgency in his voice that she had never heard before. "I don't know who you really are, where you came from, or what you're hiding from me, but I know one thing for sure." He came closer, so much so that Nina could see the golden flecks in his dark eyes, could smell his masculine scent mixed with the smell of rain that came in through the cracks in the windows. "I could never hate her." The words hit Nina like a bolt of lightning, leaving her stunned. There was a sincerity there that hurt, a tenderness she didn't know how to receive. "You don't know me," she said, her voice hoarse. "Then let me meet you." Cale lifted his hand slowly, giving her time to pull away if she wanted. When Nina didn't move, he touched her face with his fingertips, a touch so gentle it almost didn't feel real. "You're the first person in years who's made me feel like I'm not dead inside," he said, his voice little more than a whisper. "You came here and changed everything." Nina closed her eyes, pressing her face into his palm. It was madness, it was dangerous. It was everything she couldn't allow to happen. But when she opened her eyes and saw the way Cale was looking at her, as if she were precious, as if she were the most important thing in the world, all her resistance melted away. "Cale," she murmured. "Say my name again." "Cale." He leaned closer, and Nina could feel his breath brushing her lips. The space between them was charged with a tension that made the air vibrate, like the moment before a lightning strike. "I want to kiss you," he said, his voice husky with desire. "But only if you want me to." Nina knew she had to back down. She knew that one kiss would change everything, would make it impossible to go back, would turn her mission of revenge into something much more complicated. But when she looked into his eyes and saw the vulnerability there, when she realized he was as lost as she was, all sensible reasons disappeared. "Yes," he whispered. The kiss started out soft, hesitant, as if Cale was afraid of scaring her. But when Nina kissed him back, when her hands found his chest and felt the firm muscles beneath the fabric of his shirt, something changed. The kiss deepened, becoming hungrily, desperately. 3 weeks of pent-up tension, of furtive glances and accidental touches, exploded all at once. Nina heard herself moan softly as Cale pulled her closer, as she felt his hands in her hair, as she realized she was being kissed, as if she were the air he needed to breathe. That's when the generator started working again. The lights came on abruptly, invading the intimate bubble they had created and bringing reality back with an almost physical cruelty. Nina and Cale separated abruptly, panting, looking at each other as if they were strangers. I have to go," Nina said, standing up quickly. "Nina, wait." But she was already running away from the library and the hurt expression on his face, running away from the taste of him on her lips and the feel of his hands on her skin, running away from what she had just discovered about herself. In the days that followed, Nina tried to settle back into her normal routine. She cleaned, cooked, organized, pretended nothing had changed. But everything had. The air in the mansion was thick with a different tension now, every chance encounter between her and Cale a minefield of unspoken glances and swallowed words. He didn't try to repeat what had happened in the library. On the contrary, he seemed to be careful to keep his distance so as not to scare her any more than he already had. But Nina could feel his gaze on her back when he thought she wasn't looking, could see the way he hesitated before entering a room where she was, and it was driving her crazy. On Thursday, a week after the kiss, Nina was tidying Cale's room when she found something that changed everything. He had left for a meeting in Angra, a rare occurrence since he avoided commitments whenever possible. Nina was changing the sheets when she saw the drawer of the bedside table ajar. Normally, she would never pry, but something golden shining inside caught her eye. It was a chain, delicate, feminine, with a heart-shaped pendant. Nina took it with trembling hands and the world seemed to stop around her. She knew that chain. She had worn it around her neck for 2 years, before it all began. It was yours, the Pooh chain her grandmother had given her before she died, the only thing of value she had when she arrived at the Hope Foundation at the age of 12. The chain that had been taken from her that first night, along with her clothes and her dignity, and her innocence. How did Cale have it? Nina sat down heavily on the bed, the chain burning in her hands like hot metal. There was only one possible explanation. Cale wasn't just complicit in what had happened at the Foundation. He knew. He knew who she was. He knew where she came from. He knew why she was there. It had all been an act. The interest, the concern, the kiss in the library, everything. The pain that shot through her chest was so intense that Nina could barely breathe. She had allowed herself to believe, for the first time in years, that someone might see her as more than a victim, as more than a broken object. She had allowed herself to feel something other than anger and revenge. And she had been deceived. Again. Nina put the chain in her pocket and finished tidying the room with mechanical movements. When Cale returned, she was in the kitchen preparing dinner, her face a perfect mask of indifference. "Good afternoon," he said, stopping at the kitchen entrance. "Good afternoon, sir." The formality was a stab, and Nina saw Cale blink. As if he'd been slapped. "Nina, are you okay?" "I'm fine." She didn't look at him, concentrating on chopping vegetables with more force than necessary. "You look—" "What do I look like?" Nina finally looked up, and Cale recoiled at the coldness he found there. "They seem distant." Nina gave a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "I'm your maid, Mr. Davila. Distance is appropriate." The formal use of his surname was another blow, and Nina felt a bitter satisfaction as she saw the pain flash across his face. After what happened in the library. "It was a mistake," Nina said, going back to chopping the vegetables. "A mistake that won't happen again." Cale stood there for a long moment, and Nina could feel the weight of his gaze. Finally, she heard his footsteps moving away. That night, Nina made her decision. She had spent weeks trying to find evidence against Cale, but now she knew the truth. He wasn't innocent. He was worse than she had imagined. A manipulator who toyed with her like a cat plays with a wounded mouse. It was time to put an end to this. Nina waited until she was sure Cale was asleep before leaving the room. She had memorized the combination to the office safe the night Gustavo had been there, and now she would use that knowledge. The safe opened silently, revealing stacks of documents, neat folders, and a few pieces of jewelry. Nina methodically searched through everything, looking for anything that could definitively connect Cale to the Foundation. It was at the bottom of the safe that he found it. A small, simple wooden box. Inside, photographs, dozens of photographs of girls, some that Nina recognized from the Foundation, others she didn't know. All of them young. All of them with the same frightened look that she herself once had. And at the bottom of the box, a document that made his blood run cold. Transfer of guardianship. Nina Santos Silva. His real name. And Cale's signature authorizing his transfer to an adoptive family abroad. Nina sat down heavily in her office chair, her hands shaking so badly she could barely hold the paper. Here was the definitive proof. Cale hadn't just funded the Foundation. He had actively participated in the trafficking of girls. He had sold her. The pain in her chest was so intense that Nina thought she was going to vomit. All the doubts she had begun to have, all the confusing feelings she had developed for him, all of it disappeared in a wave of pure rage. Kyle Navarro Davila had bought and sold children like cattle, and she had fallen in love with him. Nina took pictures of all the documents with her cell phone, put everything back in the safe and went back to her room. But she didn't sleep. She sat on the bed until dawn, planning. The next morning, Cale was different. There was something restless in his movements, something urgent in the way he looked at her. Nina pretended to be normal, served breakfast and waited. "Nina," he said finally, as she was clearing the plates from the table, "I need to talk to you." "Yes, sir?" "Not here, outside on the balcony." Nina followed him to the balcony. That overlooked the sea, her heart pounding in her chest. Was this it? Would he finally reveal who he really was? "I know you've been acting strange," Cale began, leaning against the marble balustrade, "and I know why." Nina waited, motionless. "You found the chain," he said, turning to face her. "In my room." Nina didn't answer, but the expression on her face was answer enough. "I can explain," Cale said, his voice urgent. "It's not what you think." "And what am I thinking?" Nina's voice came out as cold as ice. "That I knew who you were from the beginning. That I brought you here on purpose." Cale ran a hand through his hair in frustration. "But that's not true. I only found out who you really were 3 days ago." "Liar!" The word came out like a slap, and Cale recoiled as if he had been physically struck. "Nina!" "My name is not Nina," she said, her voice rising. "My name is Ana. Ana Santos Silva." "And you know that very well." Cale paled. "Ana," he repeated as if testing the name on his tongue. "My God, Do you remember now? Anna laughed, but it was a humorless sound. Remember the 12-year-old girl you sold to a family in Europe? The one who never made it to her destination because she was... Stop, Cale said, his voice hoarse. Please. Because she was raped, tortured, branded like cattle before she managed to escape. Anna continued, relentless. The one who spent years living on the streets before finding out who had signed the papers that authorized her sale. Cale was white as a sheet now, leaning against the railing as if he were going to faint. I didn't know, he whispered. Anna, I swear to everything that's holy, I didn't know. Liar! Anna screamed, and years of pent-up anger exploded all at once. You knew. Everyone knew. It was a business deal, a commercial transaction, and you... I didn't know, Cale yelled back, and there was desperation in his voice. Gustavo told me it was adoption. He said we were helping orphaned children find families. I signed the papers because I trusted him. Anna stopped screaming, more shocked by the intensity of his reaction than by the words themselves. Gustavo brought me dozens of cases over the years, Cale continued, his voice breaking. Children who needed homes. I funded the adoptions through the foundation, but I never saw the children. I never knew their names. It was just paperwork. Lie, said Anna, but with less conviction. When I found out the truth 3 years ago, I confronted Gustavo. That was when I left public life, when I walked away from everything. I couldn't live knowing that I had financed... Cale turned back to the sea, his shoulders shaking. But it was too late. The damage had already been done. Anna stared at him confused. There was something in his voice, in the way his entire body seemed to be falling apart, that didn't seem like an act. The chain, she said. How did you get it? Cale closed his eyes. Gustavo brought it to me. He said it belonged to one of the girls who had died during the process. He said I should keep it as a reminder of what my naivety had cost me. And you saved it? I kept it because I hate myself every day for being so blind, so stupid. Cale turned to her, his eyes shining with unshed tears. And now I find out that the girl who owned that chain was alive. She was here, in my house, and I... He didn't finish the sentence, but Anna understood. And I fell in love with her. Silence stretched between them, heavy as the air before a storm. Anna tried to process everything she had heard, to separate. Truth from lies, reality from desperate hope. Prove it, she said finally. As? If Gustavo is truly responsible, prove it. Show me evidence. Cale stared at her for a long moment, and Anna saw the exact moment he made a decision. Tonight, he said, Gustavo is coming here for our monthly meeting. You can hide and hear everything. Why would you do that? Why would you help me find out the truth if it might destroy you too? Cale approached her slowly, as he had done in the library, but this time there was no hesitation in his movements. Because I love you, he said simply, and because you deserve justice. The words hit Anna like lightning, leaving her breathless. She wasn't prepared for this, not after she'd spent the entire night hating him. Cale, I love you, he repeated, closer now. It doesn't matter who you are, where you come from, or what you're here to do. I love you and I'll help you get what you need. Ina looked into his eyes and saw truth there. Truth and love, and a pain that mirrored her own. And for one terrible, wonderful moment, he allowed himself to believe. Nina and Cale, Part 3. At 8 o'clock in the evening, Anna was hiding in the closet in the living room adjacent to Cale's office. The space was cramped, stuffy, and smelled of polished wood and cleaning products, but she could hear everything that was happening in the next room perfectly through the thin wall that separated the two spaces. Cale had purposely left the door ajar, and Anna could just make out his silhouette through the crack. He was sitting behind the mahogany desk, his hands folded, his face a mask of controlled calm. But Anna knew enough about him now to notice the signs of tension, the slight set of his jaw, the stiffness of his shoulders, the way his fingers drummed quietly on the wood. The sound of Gustavo's car arriving echoed through the open windows, followed by the familiar click of the key in the main lock. Anna held her breath, her heart pounding so hard she was afraid Gustavo might hear it. Steady footsteps on the stairs. Footsteps she knew well. She had heard them that terrible night when she had discovered the truth about who was really behind the foundation. Cale. Gustavo's voice echoed in the office, full of the authority of someone who had always gotten what he wanted. You seem tense. I'm fine. Cale's response was dry, formal. Anna heard the sound of a chair being scraped, Gustavo settling in as if he owned the place. At 53, Gustavo Davila was a man who commanded respect through fear, someone who had turned manipulation into an art form. Your new maid is interesting, Gustavo said casually, and Anna felt her blood run cold. Pretty, discreet, just the kind that used to catch your eye. What are you talking about? Kyle's voice was controlled, but Anna could detect the tension underneath. Nina Villar, though I doubt that's her real name. Gustavo chuckled softly, the sound humorless. Did you really think I wouldn't investigate a mysterious young woman who shows up out of nowhere wanting to work in your secluded home? The silence that followed was deafening. Anna could barely breathe. She's just a maid, Cale finally said. Cale, please. We've known each other too long for these lies. Gustavo sighed dramatically. Ana Santos Silva, 28 years old, orphaned since she was 10. She passed through our beloved Hope Foundation when she was 12. Anna covered her mouth with her hands to stifle the scream that wanted to come out. Gustavo knew. He always knew. You knew, Cale said, and there was pure accusation in his voice. From day one, you knew who she was. Naturally. Do you think I would allow a ghost from our past to approach you unsupervised? Gustavo laughed again. The question, there's why didn't you tell me you recognized her? Because I didn't recognize her, Cale admitted, his voice low. I only found out who she was a few days ago. When he found the chain. When I found the chain. Anna closed her eyes, fighting back tears. Cale had spoken the truth. He really didn't know who she was. And now? Gustavo asked. What? Do you intend to do with our little Anna? Nothing, she's not my problem. Cale's lie was so convincing that for a moment, Anna almost believed it. But she knew his voice now, knew when he was faking. Nonsense, Gustavo said. You've fallen in love with her. It's written all over your face every time you look at her. That's ridiculous. It's dangerous, Gustavo corrected, his voice hardening. Ana Santos Silva knows things that could destroy us. She lived through what happened at the foundation. She can testify. There is nothing left to testify. The foundation closed 3 years ago. But there are records, documents, and now there is a new opportunity on the horizon. Anna felt her stomach sink. New opportunity. What are you talking about? Kyle asked. Instituto Renacer. Same model, new children, international support. Contacts in Europe are eager to resume business. I'm not going to participate in this. You don't have a choice. Gustavo's voice turned icy. Your name is still on all the documents from the original foundation. If Anna decides to talk, you'll go to prison with me. The only difference is that I have protection, you don't. What kind of protection? The kind that comes with compromising photographs of certain authorities involved in our special services. Gustavo chuckled softly. You've always been too naive, Kyle. Too honest for that kind of business. Anna heard the sound of paper being placed on the table. Sign, Gustavo said. Authorization for transfer of funds. 5 million reais to the Renacer Institute. No. Sign it, or I'll make sure Ana Santos Silva has a very convincing accident. The silence that followed lasted an eternity. Anna could hear her own heart beating, could feel the sweat running down her back. You would kill her? Cale's voice was incredulous. No hesitation, she is an unacceptable risk. What if I sign? What happens to it? If you sign and continue to be a good boy, maybe I'll allow her to continue living her meaningless little life. Away from you, of course. Anna heard the sound of a pen being picked up. No, he thought desperately. Don't sign. Not because of me. But Cale couldn't hear her, and she could hear in his breathing that he was about to give in. That's when Anna made the bravest decision of her life. Came out of the closet. The office door opened with a bang, and Anna stormed in, her face ablaze with rage. Don't sign it, she said, looking directly at Cale. Not because of me. Gustavo stood up abruptly, his chair falling backwards. His face was livid, his eyes narrowed in pure fury. Little bitch, he growled. How much did you hear? Enough to know that you're a monster, Anna said, turning to face him, and that you're going to pay for everything you've done. Gustavo laughed, but it was a dangerous sound. You have no idea what you're up against, girl. I could make you disappear with one phone call. It could, Anna agreed, but it won't. And why not? Anna smiled, and there was something wild in her expression. Because I'm not the scared 12-year-old girl you sold anymore, and because this time, I'm not alone. She took her phone out of her pocket and showed the screen. There was a recording app running. Everything recorded, she said, pleased by the look of shock on Gustavo's face. Every word, every confession, every threat. Gustavo approached her with predatory movements, but Cale stood up abruptly, blocking his path. No, Cale said, his voice low and dangerous. Don't touch her. Get out of my way, Gustavo growled. No. The two men stared at each other, and Anna could feel the impending violence in the air like electricity before a storm. You're choosing her over your own safety? Gustavo asked in disbelief. I'm choosing what's right, Cale said. Something I should have done a long time ago. Gustavo took a step back, calculating. Then he smiled, but it was an expression without warmth. Very well, he said. Do you want to play? Let's play. But remember, I know people in very high places. People who won't like being exposed at all. Then they should have thought about that before getting involved in child trafficking, Anna replied. Gustavo studied her for a long moment, and Anna saw the exact moment he changed strategy. You know, he said, his voice suddenly soft, you've grown into a very beautiful woman, Anna. Very different from the dirty little girl I knew. Anna felt nausea rise in her throat, but didn't show it. I remember you, Gustavo continued, approaching slowly. So stubborn, so resilient, even after all the lessons. Stop, Cale said, his voice thick with warning, but Gustavo ignored her, fixing his eyes on Anna. I remember your scars, little works of art on your skin. I'd like to see how they've changed over time. That's when Anna broke down. Years of pent-up anger, of repressed pain, of thirst for revenge, exploded all at once. She threw herself at Gustavo with a scream that came from the depths of her soul, her nails searching for his eyes. Cale caught her before she could reach him, his arms closing around her like a protective barrier. Calm down, he whispered in her ear. Calm down, Anna, he's not worth it. Anna struggled against the embrace for a moment before collapsing, her body shaking with sobs that came from deep within. Gustavo watched the scene with evident amusement. Touching, he said, but that doesn't change anything. You have until tomorrow night to give me this recording and any copies you made. Otherwise, he didn't finish the sentence, but the threat hung in the air like toxic smoke. Get out of my house, Cale said, his voice low and lethal. Gustavo smiled, grabbed his coat, and headed for the door. He stopped in the doorway and turned around. Oh, and Cale, next time your little girlfriend wants to play spy, maybe you guys should check for security cameras in the hallway. He left laughing, leaving Anna and Cale alone in the office, enveloped in a silence as heavy as lead. Anna was still trembling in Cale's arms, her face wet with tears she didn't remember shedding. He held her as if she were fragile as crystal, his hands making gentle movements on her back. It's over, he whispered. He's gone. For now, Anna said, her voice muffled against his chest. Anna, look at me. She lifted her face, and Cale wiped her tears with his thumbs. We'll figure this out, he said, together. How? You heard what he said. He has protection. Contacts, power. And we have the truth. Anna almost laughed, but there was no humor in that moment. The truth means nothing when the other side controls who gets to hear it. Cale studied her for a long moment, and Anna saw a new determination in his eyes. "Then let's make it impossible for them to ignore," he said. Let's make the story public. All the media, all the newspapers, all the social networks. Let's create such a big noise that they won't be able to shut it down." Anna stared at him, hope rising in her chest like a small but persistent flame. "This could destroy you too," she said. "Your name is on every document. I'm not bothered." "Cale—" "I don't care," he repeated, his hands framing her face. "If it takes going to prison to see you free, I will." The words struck Anna like lightning, leaving her breathless. There was a sincerity there that cut through all her defenses, a devotion she didn't know how to receive. "Why?" she whispered. "Why would you do this for me?" "Because I love you," he said simply. "Because you deserve justice. And because spending the rest of my life knowing that I did nothing to protect you would be a hell far worse than any prison." Anna stared at him, lost. For years she had dreamed of revenge, of justice, of the day she would make those responsible pay. But she had never dreamed of this, of someone who would be willing to sacrifice everything for her. "I don't know how to do this," she admitted. "Do what?" "Let someone love me." Cale smiled, and it was such a tender expression that it made her heart race. "You don't need to know," he said. "You just need to let it happen." Anna studied him, the strong face lined with worry and determination, the dark eyes that watched her as if she were the most precious thing in the world, the hands that touched her as if she might break. And he made a decision. She stood up on her tiptoes and kissed him. The kiss was different from the one in the library. There was no hesitation now, no doubts or fears. It was a kiss of surrender, of acceptance, of two wounded souls finding solace in each other. Cale responded with a passion that made Anna feel alive in a way she hadn't felt in years. His hands got lost in her hair, his body pressed against hers, and Anna could feel his desire mixed with tenderness and something deeper that scared and excited her at the same time. When they broke apart, they were both panting. "Anna," Cale said, his voice hoarse. "I know," she whispered. "Me too." They didn't need to say the words. The love was there, palpable between them like a physical presence. "Tonight could be our last night of peace," Anna said, reality intruding on the intimate moment. "Then let's enjoy it," Cale said. He picked her up without warning and Anna laughed, the first genuinely happy sound she'd made in years. Cale carried her upstairs to his room, and Anna buried her face in his neck, breathing in the scent that had become synonymous with security. The room was bathed in soft moonlight that streamed in through the open windows, creating silvery patterns on the wooden floor. Cale set her down slowly, his hands never losing contact with her. "Are you sure?" he asked, his eyes searching hers in the dim light. "I'm sure," Anna said. And it was true. For the first time in 16 years, she was certain of something. Cale kissed her forehead, her eyelids, her cheeks, as if he were memorizing every inch. Anna closed her eyes and allowed herself to feel, really feel, without fear, without shame, without the armor she had built to protect herself. Cale's hands found the top button of her blouse, and he stopped. "Anna," he said, his voice soft. "The scars. You don't have to show them to me if you don't want to." Anna opened her eyes. There was understanding there, respect, love that did not depend on physical perfection. "I want to," she said, surprising herself with her courage. "I want you to see me, all of me." What happened next was more than Anna could have ever imagined. Cale touched her as if she were sacred, kissed every scar as if he could heal it with tenderness, whispered words of love against her skin as if they were prayers. And for the first time, since she was 12, Anna felt beautiful. They made love slowly, intensely, as if they had all the time in the world. Cale showed Anna that her body could be a source of pleasure, not just pain. And Anna showed Cale that he could be vulnerable without being weak. Afterwards, lying in each other's arms, Anna traced lazy circles on Cale's chest with her fingertips. "Cale," she said. "Tomorrow, when this all starts, it could get ugly. I know. Gustavo won't give up easily. He's going to fight dirty. I know." Anna propped herself up on her elbow to look at him. "You could lose everything: money, reputation, freedom." Kyle reached out and touched her face. "And I can gain something that's worth more than all of this." "What?" "You free, living the life you deserve to live." Anna felt tears burn her eyes again, but they were different tears this time. Tears of gratitude, of love, of hope. "I love you," she said, the words coming out before she could stop them. Cale smiled, and Anna realized it was the first time she had seen him truly smile. Not a polite or controlled smile, but pure happiness. "I love you too," he said. "And we will succeed. We will destroy Gustavo and everyone like him, and then we will live." Anna snuggled against his chest, listening to the strong, regular beat of his heart. For the first time in years, the future didn't seem like a threat. It seemed like a promise. But as they slept, embraced in the darkness, neither of them knew that Gustavo had already put his plan into motion, and that the morning would bring a surprise that would test not only their love, but their very survival. Nina and Cale, Part 4 Final. Anna woke to the sound of sirens cutting through the morning silence like sharp blades. For a confused moment, still wrapped in the warmth of Cale's arms and the memory of the night before, she thought it might just be a nightmare. But the sirens grew louder, closer until they became impossible to ignore. Cale was already sitting on the bed, his body tense like a rope about to snap, looking out the window that overlooked the entrance to the property. "Police," he said, his voice hoarse with sleep and apprehension. "3 squad cars." Anna stood up quickly, pulling the sheet to cover her body. Her heart was beating so hard it hurt. "Gustavo," she whispered. "He didn't wait until tonight." Cale nodded grimly, already dressing with quick, efficient movements. He must have reported something. Falsified evidence. The sound of the doorbell echoed through the house, followed by a firm knock on the front door. Anna could hear male voices downstairs, authoritative and impatient. "Get dressed," Cale said, tossing her one of his own shirts. "Quick." Anna obeyed, her hands shaking as she pulled on the shirt that reached almost to her knees. The fabric still carried Cale's scent, and for a moment she allowed herself to take a deep breath, calming herself. "Kyle Navarro Davila, open the door. We have a search warrant." The authoritative voice coming from downstairs made Anna freeze. It was real, it was happening. "Listen," Cale said, taking her face in his hands. "Whatever happens, you did nothing wrong. If they try to break us up, if they try to intimidate you, you don't say anything without a lawyer present, understand?" Anna nodded, fighting the panic that threatened to consume her. "And Anna," he said, his voice softer, "I love you. No matter what happens today, tomorrow, or 10 years from now, I love you." Before she could respond, the sound of breaking glass echoed through the floor below. They had broken down the door. "Stay where you are. Hands where we can see them." Caius took Anna's hand and they walked down the stairs together. The main hall was filled with uniformed police officers, all of them with the tense posture of those expecting resistance. A middle-aged man, clearly the officer in charge, stepped forward when he saw them. "Kyle Navarro Davila?" "Yes." "He is under arrest on suspicion of involvement in child trafficking, money laundering and gang formation," the officer signaled to the other officers. "Handcuff him." "Wait," Anna said, stepping forward. "Do you have an order to arrest him?" The deputy looked at her with barely concealed contempt. "And who are you?" "I'm Nina Villa, the housekeeper, and I want to know what evidence you have." "Sufficient evidence," the sheriff replied, as an officer handcuffed Cale behind his back. "Documents, bank records, photographs." Anna felt her stomach sink. Gustavo had planted evidence. That was exactly what he would do. "Delegate Costa." The familiar voice echoed through the broken door, and Anna turned to see Gustavo entering the house with the posture of someone who was in complete control of the situation. "Mr. Davila," the police chief said, greeting Gustavo with obvious deference, "thank you for your cooperation in this case." "It's my civic duty," Gustavo said, his eyes fixed on Anna with grim satisfaction. "When I found out my brother was involved in this, well, I had no choice but to contact the authorities." Anna looked at Cale and saw pure anger in his eyes, but he didn't say anything, just watching as he was led towards the door. "And the woman?" asked one of the police officers, looking at Anna. "She's just a victim," Gustavo said with false compassion. "One of the girls who were harmed by the scheme. I'm sure she'll cooperate with the investigation." Anna understood immediately. Gustavo was presenting her as a former victim who had become Cale's employee. A story that would make her seem too crazy or traumatized to be a reliable witness against him. "No," she said, her voice louder than she intended. "That's not true." All eyes turned to her. Gustavo raised an eyebrow as if he was surprised. "Nina, darling," he said, his voice dripping with false concern. "I know it's hard to accept that the person you trusted was taking advantage of you again, but—" "My name is not Nina," Anna interrupted, squaring her shoulders. "My name is Ana Santos Silva, and I have evidence that proves Cale Navarro. Davila is innocent." The silence that followed was deafening. Anna could feel all the eyes on her, could see the look of shock on Cale's face, could sense the exact moment Gustavo realized he had underestimated her fighting ability. "Evidence?" the sheriff asked skeptically. Anna took her cell phone out of her pocket, silently thanking herself for hiding it there the night before. "Recordings," she said, holding up the device, "of the conversation between Gustavo Davila and Cale last night. Full confessions about the real drug trafficking scheme." Gustavo's expression instantly changed, going from confidence to barely contained fury. "This woman is lying," he said, his voice tight. "She is psychologically unstable, traumatized. She would make up anything to protect her abuser." "Then, you won't mind listening to the recordings," Anna replied, pressing play. Gustavo's voice echoed through the hall. "Renassa Institute. Same model. New children. International support. Contacts in Europe are eager to resume business." "The police," Chief paled. Anna continued to play the recording, each word a bomb that exploded in the tense silence of the mansion. "If Anna decides to talk, you'll go to prison with me. The only difference is that I have protection. You don't. The kind that comes with compromising photographs of certain officials involved in our special services." When the recording ended, there was absolute silence. The police chief was looking at Gustavo with an expression that mixed shock, disgust, and anger. This is fake," Gustavo stammered. "Montage. Digital fabrication." "Easy to verify," Anna said, handing the cell phone to the officer. "The metadata will show that it was recorded last night at 8:15 p.m. in this house." The sheriff took out his phone, his hands shaking. Anna could see he was processing the implications of what he had just heard, especially the part about certain authorities involved. "Let him go," the deputy finally said, gesturing toward Cale. "Deputy," Gustavo protested, "you can't trust the word of a—" "Shut up," the police chief snapped, all previous deference gone. "Gustavo Davila, you are under arrest for trafficking. Minors corruption, forming a criminal gang and threatening a witness." The turnaround was so fast that Anna could barely process it. Suddenly it was Gustavo's wrists being held by handcuffs. It was him being led towards the door while shouting threats and denials. "This isn't going to stand," he shouted, looking directly at Anna. "You have no idea how many important people will want your head." "Then they can join the line," Anna replied, her voice as steady as steel. When the last police officer left the mansion, taking Gustavo away in handcuffs, Anna and Cale were left alone in the destroyed hall, surrounded by broken glass and overturned furniture. Cale looked at her as if she was a miracle. "How did you manage to keep the recording?" he asked, still in disbelief. "I uploaded it to the cloud right away," Anna said, smiling for the first time since waking up. "And," I created copies in 3 different accounts. Gustavo may be smart, but I learned a few things from living on the streets. Gael laughed, a sound of pure relief, and pulled her into his arms, spinning her in the air as if she weighed nothing. "You're amazing," he said, kissing her with a passion that made Anna dizzy. Absolutely amazing. But even in the midst of the celebration, Anna knew the fight was far from over. "Gael," she said, pulling away slightly, "Gustavo wasn't lying about having protection. There are powerful people involved in this." "I know." Gael's face turned serious again. "And they'll try to silence us before we can expose everything. Then we need to act quickly." Anna was already thinking, planning. She had learned on the streets that when you had an advantage, you couldn't waste it. "Do you know any journalists?" she asked. "People you trust?" "Some." "Why?" "Because we're going to do exactly what you said yesterday. We're going to make it impossible for them to hush this up." Over the next 6 hours, Anna and Gael transformed the mansion into a command center. Gael used his media contacts, while Anna combed through every document in the vault, organizing evidence and building an irrefutable case. In the afternoon, they received a visit from Marina Santos, an investigative journalist for the country's largest television network. Marina was a 40-year-old woman with gray hair and sharp eyes that didn't miss a single detail. "It's a big story," she said, after listening to the recording and examining the documents. "But it's also dangerous. The people mentioned here, some of them could become ministers." "That's exactly why it needs to be told," Anna said. "How many children will suffer if we let this go?" Marina studied her for a long moment. "Are you sure you want to expose yourself like this? Your story will be known by millions of people." Anna thought about the 12-year-old girl who had been sold like cattle, about the marks on her skin, about the nightmares that still woke her up some nights. She thought about all the other girls who had passed through the foundation and never had the chance to tell their stories. "I'm sure," she said. "And you?" Marina looked at Gael. "Your reputation will be ruined, even if you are proven innocent. Some stains never come out completely." Gael looked at Anna, and she saw love and determination in his eyes. "I don't care," he said. "If it takes burning my life to give her the justice she deserves, it's a small price to pay." Marina smiled for the first time since she arrived. "Then, let's do this right." The report aired at 8 p.m. during prime time on Brazilian television. Anna watched it hand in hand with Gael, her heart pounding as she watched her own story being told to millions of people. Marina had done a brilliant job. The report began with the Hope Foundation, showed documents, testimonies from other victims who had agreed to speak, and ended with excerpts from Gustavo's recording. The impact was immediate and devastating. Within 2 hours of the broadcast, 3 officials mentioned in the recordings resigned from their posts. 2 people were arrested. The Federal Public Prosecutor's Office announced the opening of a special investigation. And most importantly for Anna, the station's phone didn't stop ringing with calls from other victims, other survivors who finally felt safe to speak out. "We did it," Gael said, squeezing her hand as they watched the news online. "We really did it." Anna nodded, but there were tears in her eyes, not of sadness, but of relief so deep it hurt. "It's over," she whispered. "It's finally over." 3 months later, Anna stood on the porch of the mansion, watching the golden sunset spill over the waters of Angra dos Reis. The case against Gustavo and his accomplices was being considered the largest child trafficking case in the country's history. He had been sentenced to 40 years in prison, without the possibility of parole. Gael approached from behind, wrapping his arms around her and kissing her neck softly. "What are you thinking?" he asked. "How everything has changed," Anna said, leaning against his chest. "A year ago I couldn't even sleep at night. Now? Anna smiled, turning in his arms. "Now I dream of the future." Gael kissed her, long and soft, as if they had all the time in the world. And they did, Anna realized. Finally they did. "I have a proposition for you," he said when they parted. "What kind of proposal?" Gael smiled, and Anna saw nervousness in his eyes. "The kind that involves you agreeing to use my last name." Anna blinked, processing the words. "Are you Asking you to marry me, he finished, taking a small velvet box from his pocket. Will you marry me, Ana Santos Silva? Ana looked at the ring, simple, elegant, perfect, and then at the man who had become her anchor, her home, her future. Yes, she said, laughing through her tears. Of course. When Cale slid the ring onto her finger, Ana felt as if one last chain had snapped. She was no longer the frightened girl who had been sold at 12. She was no longer the revenge-hungry woman who had come to the mansion in disguise. It was Ana, simply Ana, loved, free, and finally alive. I love you, she said, the words coming easily now, as natural as breathing. I love you too, Cale said, kissing her again. Forever. As the sun set over the horizon, turning the sky orange and pink, Ana thought about all the girls who were still out there, lost, scared, without hope. The foundation she and Cale had started with his money, a real organization dedicated to helping victims of trafficking rebuild their lives, had already helped more than 50 young people. She couldn't save the 12-year-old girl she had been, but she could save others, and that Ana knew was enough. The past no longer defined her future. The present was hers to live, and the future was theirs to build. Together. 6 months after the wedding, Ana was standing in the garden of the A mansion when she felt her first morning sickness. For a moment she was paralyzed, old memories threatening to come flooding back. But then Cale appeared, took her hand, and she saw unconditional love in his eyes. Let's go to the doctor, he said softly. The test confirmed what Ana already knew deep down in her heart. She was pregnant. I'm scared, she admitted to Cale that night, lying in the bed they had shared for so many happy nights. Why? What if I don't know how to be a mother? What if everything I've experienced makes me a bad person for a child? Cale turned to her, his eyes serious but full of tenderness. Ana, you survived the impossible. You fought monsters and won. You turned your pain into strength to help others. He placed his hand on her still flat stomach. This child will have the bravest, strongest, most loving mother in the world. Ana smiled through her tears, covering his hand with her own. And the most protective and dedicated father. Always, Cale promised. And for the first time in her entire life, Ana completely believed in forever. The girl was born on a sunny spring morning with her father's dark eyes and her mother's fierce determination. They named her Hope, not for the foundation that had caused so much suffering, but for the hope Ana had found amid the darkness, the hope Cale had given her, the hope that the future could always be better than the past. And when Ana held her daughter for the first time, looking at that perfect, innocent little face, she knew she had finally broken the cycle. Hope would never know fear, never feel alone, never doubt that she was loved unconditionally. Hi, my love, Ana whispered, kissing the baby's forehead. Welcome to the world, a world where you'll be free to be exactly who you want to be. Cale leaned down to kiss both his wife and daughter, his eyes shining with tears of pure happiness. Our family, he said, amazed. Our family, Ana agreed. And outside, the sun shone over Angra dos Reis, promising better days for all who were brave. Enough to believe in true love.